I'm literally, I've selected the mute. I could literally see that I had selected the mute. Thank you very much for coming in there. Maybe I'll do a whole. I'll have to say everything I just said again. I just morphed. Oh no. Was it? Did I go from up to down or? Whoa. Huge shout out to the parents. I haven't installed it yet, but we got a new camera coming in. We're gonna do that. The Elgato camera, which should, I guess I still go 1080, either that or 1440. But the cool thing is I can go 60 FPS. When did I learn to teleport? After reaching 14 minutes meditation time. Actually, today was 13:55, so tomorrow is 14 minutes. That's how I learned how to teleport. We're just gonna keep going. We keep going into. Oh, I gotta show you. I gotta show you the Gemini convo I had about this. We're going off topic here. Everything that I was planning on doing has been now thrown off by muting and everything else here. All right, this was the question. For meditation, if I was to meditate for X total minutes a day, how should I distribute those X minutes? Okay, it depends on a trade-off between depth, reaching a profound state of focus, and frequency, resetting your nervous system throughout the day. Generally, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes for the mind to settle and the sediment of thought to sink to the bottom. If you split your time too aggressively, you may never get past the surface chatter. Here's a recommended distribution for each time tier X broken down by depth strategy. So it gives a bunch of options. So for 10 minutes, do not split no matter what. For 20 minutes, two options. You could do 120 or you could do 10 morning, 10 evening, but then you don't get past that 10 to 15 minute mark. We got 30 minutes, 2010 or 130. 40 minutes, we could go 2020, etc. But this led me to, and it gave me a little graphic that probably has nothing to do with what it was actually saying. Depends on technique and temperament, I would think. Hence, many say just experiment. Exactly. Yep. So I wanted to get a better sense of what would be the reasons why I would do one versus the other. And so I said I'm at 1340. This was, I guess, 3 days ago. And I add 5 seconds every day. So it kind of proposed that until I get to 25 minutes, I should just keep doing a single session. And then at somewhere around 25 to 30, consider whether I want to keep it at one session or switch to two. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. I feel like the trade-off is that, following my understanding on the literature about learning, more frequent sessions is more efficient at internalizing the skill over time. So I was kind of just speculating that we know that if you were to do a skill more frequently, rather than at the same length of time total, more sparsely, that you get more gains, I guess. It's a more effective strategy at learning in the long term. Yeah, solid, nice. So I was kind of considering this thing. However, if I'm unable to actually exercise important aspects of mindfulness skills at lower durations, then it won't matter if I do it twice versus once a day, right? So my question really is, what kind of skills would I be strengthening if I did it short times, or short duration many times versus long duration? And that's where we got into this nice response. In almost every domain, learning a language, playing the piano, shooting free throws, distributed practice beats mass practice, one long session. However, meditation is a unique exception to this rule at lower time tiers because of the mental setup cost. Here is why your intuition is right for most skills, but why splitting your current 13 minutes would likely backfire. The setup cost problem. Unlike practicing a tennis serve, where you can walk onto the court and hit a perfect serve in the first minute, meditation has a biological warm-up period. So 0 to 10 minutes, this is the settling phase. Your nervous system is dumping excess norepinephrine. Your default mode network is still spinning. You are processing the residue of the last few hours. And then 10 plus minutes, give or take, this is where the training officially begins. It depends what we mean by training here, but the sediment settles and you can actually observe the mind rather than just fight it. Okay, that's true of some techniques, but not others, I would say. Appropriate for things like Zen, less appropriate for things like Samatha. Feel free to ask AI about that thinking. Okay. I'm going to keep that in my clipboard. If you're strict about not moving, then long sits can be better. Okay. The math at 14 minutes, one 14-minute session. So, you know, you get that, you actually get some time of the high quality training, whatever that means here. And then if you were to split that, you get 0 minutes of that. So the two types of mindfulness skills, this is the real thing that I was looking for. Skills that require duration, the deep skills, would be something like sustained attention, the ability to hold focus for extended periods of time without flickering. You cannot train endurance in 5-minute bursts. Equanimity with discomfort, learning to sit through boredom, an itch, or the urge to check your phone. This only happens when you sit longer than when you want to, or than you want. Subtle detection, catching very quiet, subtle distractions like a slight change in mood requires a very still, settled mind. So this is like the most important thing, I think, for me right now. I want to be able to get to the point where I can notice subtle changes in my mood or just, you know, consciousness in general, which I don't think I'm getting from my current practice, but we're getting there. Skill, maybe I'm getting it slightly now, because I'm kind of noticing like I can feel like similarities in states, like in dopaminergic states, or states of I don't know, like brain fog and stuff like that. And yeah, trying to break through to certain samatha experiences, then continuity is important. AI is kind of saying that. Nice. Yeah, I wanted to run this by you. With all these optimization ideas, there is the underlying layer that it manifests differently for all people. Right. Yep. So it's there's not a one size fits all. I guess I was trying to get to the how should I go about choosing for me? Like what's on the menu here? So on a personal level, that lens becomes more important, right? And for me, I think it's going to be more important that I get both of these skills, but it does seem like I'm going to want skills from each of these, because skills that require frequency, the wide skills, the wake up moment, remembering to be mindful during the day or during daily life, during a certain experience. This I need to also strengthen, not just by doing the, you know, sitting mindfulness meditations, but at some point I should start incorporating mindfulness into specific activities throughout the day. State shifting, quickly down regulating stress during a workday. So this, I think I'm building right now. Like I can tell that like this intuitively fits what I'm experiencing. So at 1340, you are still building the deep skills. If you switch frequency now, you sacrifice the endurance training necessary to ever get deep. So I think I like the idea of continuing until 20 to 25 minutes at least. Then to switch, when to switch logic. You are right that frequency is better for internalizing the skill into your personality, making it a trait rather than a state. Ayo. This is why the morning-evening split becomes the gold standard, but only once you have enough capital to pay the setup cost twice. So you only have enough time for one warm-up, keep it masked. But at 30 minutes, I don't know if I'm going to go past 30 minutes, but you have 30 minutes. You could spend 20 in the morning and then 10 in the evening. So this might be like a beneficial goal state for us, or for me, I mean. Easiest way to measure is what motivates me to spend more total time meditating. Okay. And generally noticing patterns of what you find effective. Yeah, I like counting the breath while doing chores. That's a nice, easy one to get into. Nice. There's also a similarity to physical exercise where you hit a muscle from a different angle and then notice a difference. If you're doing long sits, then switch to short ones, there can be that effect. Right, yeah, I do, at some point, especially during March, I want to start messing with other techniques, and I think it would be beneficial for me to have a good familiarity with at least like a bedrock technique. Same thing is said about morning versus evening practice. Okay, nice. Very cool, very cool. All right, that's where it was. Okay, how does this relate to Zen versus samatha? Morning versus evening. Okay, brain chemistry is also different in those two times. True, so can feel different. Right, no, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I think I like the idea. So, you know what? I've been doing it at both, like, first thing in the morning, middle of the day, and end of the day. And I guess I haven't done it long enough to experience like a similarity or difference, or I should say a difference. They seem similar, but there's probably key differences, especially relating to how my brain is able to regulate the default mode network and just inhibitions in general. So I kind of go in knowing that, but I don't think it really affects the practice much. Difference is more pronounced, in my opinion, if you are just doing one or the other, and yeah, if you're deeper. Okay. Yeah, I'm curious, though, if I were to have a practice eventually that has the beginning of the day and the end of the day, if I notice key differences over time. All right, the massed versus distributed debate maps perfectly onto the distinction between samatha, concentration, and Zen, specifically shikantaza, or just sitting. Am I supposed to not... was it the case that I'm not supposed to put emphasis on any of the syllables, like shikantaza? Rather than doing what I've been doing, which is like putting the emphasis there. All right, while both traditions generally favor longer sessions for beginners, mass practice, they do so for completely different mechanical reasons. Wow. Here's how your current strategy applies to each path. So the goal is one pointed focus. You are training the mind to stay on a single object like the breath to the exclusion of everything else. So this is not quite the practice I'm following, given that I'm trying to keep a hold on the breath, but I'm allowing myself to notice other things and not to necessarily try to block them or exclude them. That said, it seems like the fact that I am keeping a focus on the breath is affecting my ability to keep hold on something else, which I think is pretty neat. Like, the brain can't focus on so many things at once, so by forcing yourself to stay grounded to the breath, then these other thoughts are unable to take as much real estate. It's not quite getting what I'm saying, but close. Feel free to just copy my message into the AI if you'd like and get it to criticize or explain. So then is this... I'll just do that. Maybe that'll work. Okay. Setup cost high. The mind is like a turbulent fan. It takes physically quantifiable time to spin down. If you split your time into short chunks, you're essentially restarting the fan every time it begins to slow down, right? Samatha demands mass practice. And then Zen, choiceless awareness. You are not trying to get anywhere or focus on anything. So I'm doing something in between, actually. I'm trying to focus on the breath, but allow something else to occupy whatever space is left over. You are simply sitting with things as they are. Theoretically zero, practically high. Zen masters will tell you there is no transition. Nirvana is right here. So this is a Sam Harrisism. You can do Zen in a split second. For beginner, the setup in Zen is the time it takes for you to get bored. In Zen, the training effect often kicks in exactly when you want to stop. The itch on your nose, the pain in your knee, the boredom, that is the curriculum. Okay, it favors mass practice, but for different reason. You need the duration to exhaust your ego's struggle against the present moment. If you stop every 10 minutes, you are bailing out right when the real work begins. The micro hit exception. This is actually a core part of both traditions, but they treat it as a separate practice from the formal sitting. I see. So, okay, yeah, so a samatha exercise during the day would be something like focusing on your coffee. So another cool thing, you know, I've considered like how I could meditate in some way safely while driving. And Zen, you wouldn't be able to. Yeah, you wouldn't want to do Zen while driving. That would be not safe. But samatha would be safe, given that you would essentially be paying attention to the road and trying to, and that would be a type of practice where, like, if you start thinking about the day, then you can notice that your mind is drifted, and then you can get back to the road and to driving stuff. Oh, Zen you can. Okay, Zen arguably more safe. I'm just worried that with Zen, if you're paying attention to so much, including the thoughts that you're having, you can get distracted, and then you could, you know, perhaps not give as much. It's unsafe because you're not giving as much thought onto the real activity here. That's dangerous. Yo, cool dude, Arya, what's good? How we doing? We're doing well. Because attention is not directed elsewhere. It's been a while. Well, welcome back. We're gearing up for a nice grind season, which is always the winter months. The usually dry months, the boring months. The stream time is bad for me. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I usually don't start it until like an hour from now. But so is this really late at night for you? If you're driving, then your attention would be on that, but just not distracted and more sensorial. Like, what's stopping you in a deep Zen meditation though from noticing that your attention has left the road and has, you know, gone to like a physical sensation of your body or your thought about the morning? Let's just say it's about to be called early morning, not late night. Okay, so it's way late. If you're not lost in thought, then you know what your attention is doing. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. I do feel like intuitively it's still a little risky, given that ideally when you're driving, you're keeping a pretty focused attention on certain aspects of the road. Granted, maybe you can still leverage that with Zen. It's just that it seems like you would want to, like, the most safe option would be one where you hone in on a very specific thing. But maybe I'm misunderstanding samatha, where what I'm trying to think of is, you know, a samatha practice is actually too broad, and even paying attention to, you know, all the things that are required to drive is too much for a samatha practice. For samatha, maybe it's like you have to just focus on a very, very specific thing, which would then be very dangerous because you wouldn't be able to focus on all the things of driving, including the rear mirror and context of where you're at or why someone's moving in a certain way. Still inadvisable without considerable experience, but samatha also not safe and arguably less. Okay. Major category, but you normally direct attention to an object and exclude other. Okay, so you would want to have something in between, it seems. I guess the exercise I'm thinking of is you focus on driving safely, but nothing else. And wherever that lies, that would be the practice that I think would be the most safe. All right, so then is this appropriate for things like Zen, less appropriate for things like Samatha? Your current strategy of one single session that gradually increases is actually highly appropriate for both Zen and Samatha, but for different structural reasons. All right. In Samatha, you are trying to generate a state of absorption or stable access concentration. This requires revving the engine until it sustains its momentum. If you want to provide like a more specific counter to this, then feel free. By slowly extending your single session, you are training your mind to sustain focus for longer periods. You are building the mental muscle that prevents the mind from flickering. So that's kind of what I'm doing in term with the breath. The goal is, but yeah, this is also at play during my practice, where the work of Zen often begins exactly when you want it to stop. So this, this didn't require that. It didn't require the 14 minutes. This required just the 10, really, for me. And probably even less than that. With the 10-minute meditation, this was probably happening at 5 minutes. So if you split your time into comfortable 10-minute chunks, you subconsciously avoid the confrontation with your own resistance. But yeah, of course, our brain is changing as we follow a meditation practice over time, and thus what would originally be a difficult practice, a difficult session, would not be difficult anymore. And now these itches of trying to stop or wanting to stop keeps getting extended. It's farther back. I would call it maybe informal mindfulness practice. Even though March is our meditation month, we can talk about mindfulness next month. So looking at the roadmap, next month is attention and focus. So really, we can talk about, we're allowed to talk about mindfulness. Today, so yeah, I'm going to go through all the things that, whoa. All right, I'll bring this back. Today, I wanted to go through just like a rundown before the new year, just in case I don't stream until then, but hopefully I do. There's a chance I stream tomorrow. There's a chance I don't stream tomorrow. But unfortunately, I was muted when I said these things previously. So today we had networking brainstorm, and this was to go over these types of questions, build a series of questions to ask other content creators in the space, such as what should be included in the document, requiring me to actually explain what the document is. Where are other communities that we should check out, specifically for learning for the document? The thing I also brought up, I put on screen earlier, is that somehow Ivan Neo followed us, which is huge. Huge shout out to Ivan Neo, who helped us out working on the consciousness video script. Miraculously, we were working on that script the same day, the same Saturday that he was working on, or he was talking about consciousness. So I hopped in and I asked questions about leveraging the global neuronal workspace theory. And, of course, he understood exactly what I was saying. And yeah, I think I was trying to ask a more philosophical question than he was discussing, though. And so there's more to be talked about there. But yeah, if I were to talk with Ivan, like, what would be the questions I would want to ask? So, all right, let's get back to... I was making the point that Samatha, you normally want to go deep into a specific state of concentration, then maybe hit the jhanas where long sits are beneficial. But you see, when the Zen technique is done in Tibet, they recommend practicing short times, many times, because the technique is somewhat related to an attitude to be maintained throughout the day. and the thing they are noticing requires not build up. I'm gonna throw this in here. It's hard to talk about any optimal way to meditate because we are talking about such a large group of things that each manifests personally differently. Right? It's like talking about the optimal yoga technique, and it's really based on what you want to get out of the practice. But yeah, the thing that based on what you just said, Ivan's cool. The thing that I am looking for generally, not just from my own impression when I go to that channel, is like, how do other people feel about the content creator? And it seems like everyone just likes this guy. So that's great. That's someone we would want to collaborate with or be involved with, even if just as part of a similar community. All right, you are referring to Dzogchen tradition, often called Tibetan Zen, because like Zen, it aims for a direct non-dual awareness. The specific instruction you are thinking of is short moments many times, popularized by masters like Uryen Rinpoche, Tulku Uryen Rinpoche. This advice exists because Dzogchen... okay, we've mentioned this guy before, which... I apologize for not remembering exactly. How is this guy related to previous discussions we've had? Was this someone that Sam was? Oh, okay, the Rinpoche that taught Harris. Yep, awesome. This advice exists because Dzogchen has a completely different goal than Samatha or Japanese Zen. Here is why the short times logically applies there, and whether you should switch to it at your current duration. All right, the logic of short moments. The goal is recognition, not maintenance. You're trying to glimpse the natural state of mind. This state is already perfect. You cannot build it. You can only recognize it. That's fine. I think this discounts how much your mind changes over your practice and over your practice in the sense of over a session. Similar to what we discussed previously, after 10 minutes, things are changing in the brain, and then also over your practice. So there is a different type of, you could say a different type of state of mind that you get over a long practice, a 6-month practice. That being said, the Dzogchen would probably point out that, hey, like the conditions of that state of mind though are still the same, and that's what you're looking for. And I'm almost ready to contend with that. But we might save that for March. I don't know if I want no, we might do that next month. This state is already perfect. You cannot build it. You can only recognize it. Yeah, like I don't think this is how like recognition works. As we discussed in the document, pattern recognition is afforded to you by your memory, context, etc. Even the, like, this is when I always say, like, even the sense that the only thing that is true is that you are conscious is something afforded to you by your memory and your culture. This is something learned. So the thing that you recognize in the moment is not something that is actually the same over time in a very fundamental way. It does like the mechanisms involved in that recognition are the same. So this is a very weird topic to discuss. Like the emotionality of that experience would be similar over time, but anything that you, so this is like this goes back to the Heidegger discussion. Anything that you can actually determinately point out about this experience has already fallen to some sort of memory, some sort of pattern recognition. So yeah, the question is, are you actually noticing a pattern? Like, how much of that is actually like a reflection of the same mechanisms of consciousness versus the thing that you've now learned, like the patterns you've internalized. And that's a difficult thing to talk about. It's actually very difficult for me to pull those things apart. Oh, did you see the Discord messages I sent you? I did not. I've been terrible at looking at my Discord, and I probably haven't looked at it since the last stream. Just me messing around with the AI. All right, is it something that I should look at right now? Is this something that you would want me to look at? And also, is it something that I should or should not have on screen? The problem with long sits, if a beginner tries to hold this state for 20 minutes, they usually succeed for the first 30 seconds. For the remaining 19 minutes and 30 seconds, they are just thinking about the state or zoning out. It is better to have 100 flashes of pure fresh gold, lasting 3 seconds each, than 20 minutes of brass. Fake imitation meditation. Wow. The logic of long sits. So, okay, how similar is the Dzogchen practice and the lucid dreaming technique of, what were these called? Something checks? Lucid dreaming checks. Reality checks? Reality checks. It seems that both are short moment, many times, habit building techniques that allow you to find your focus in the moment. Something like that. You can have on screen, I was just getting it to diagnose a meditation experience I unlocked. Oh, that's awesome. They have dream yoga in Tibet. They view normal life as very dreamlike. I read some of a book on Tibetan dream yoga. They remind themselves throughout the day that I am awake in a dream. Wow, okay, so this is like lucid dreaming on its head, which functions to trigger lucid dreams and so vary waking life as more dreamlike. Wow, that does both at the same time. That's pretty cool. All right, the mechanical similarity between Dzogchen's short moments and lucid dreaming's reality checks is not just a coincidence. They operate on the exact same neurological and psychological principle, habituated state recognition. In fact, in the Tibetan tradition of dream yoga, these two practices are explicitly linked. So punctuation, both practices rely on breaking the autopilot script of your daily life. In lucid dreaming, you're sleepwalking through your day. By doing a reality check, for example, is this a dream? Look at my hands. You puncture the narrative. And you can do that. I think one of the methods is every time you walk through a door, look at your hands and or do a reality check, whatever your reality check is, and hopefully in the dream you would do that and realize you're awake. However, there's always the chance that you do that in a dream and you think, oh, I'm not in a dream in your dream, and that's an issue. You stop being a character in the movie and become the audience watching it. You're sleepwalking through samsara, directed by thoughts. By doing a short moment, glimpsing the nature of mind, you puncture the conceptual stream. You stop being the thinker and recognize the awareness that holds the thought. If you don't do it while you are awake, you won't do it while you are dreaming. The brain needs to be trained to check in reflexively. All right, I feel like I jumped past the rest of this initial response. Here, there is a trap. 13 minutes is already considered long for a beginner glimpse, but short for stability. If you split that into 2 7 minutes, okay, you might end up in the dead zone. Too long for, okay, so yeah, that would be the worst. Punctuation, keep your single session, but structure it internally like this. Interesting. So this is giving me... This is giving me checkpoints within the longer practice of things to do. Strike the spark. Look directly at the nature of your mind with total freshness. Okay, so this is something I kind of already do. But yeah, when using Waking Up, Sam Harris's meditation app, he doesn't always go to the breath, although he does use that as like a primary technique. It is often more focused on just noticing the, I don't know, the feeling of experience itself. But yeah, I think I'm looking more towards the longer practice, trying to notice the specific changes in affect. So when dopamine catches me, or when some negative emotional state takes hold, and to pay attention to that, and in a very Dzogchen way, to notice like what is actually happening in a holistic sense in my consciousness. Okay, I read some of a book on Tibetan dream yoga. They remind themselves throughout the day that I am awake in a dream. Okay, to view waking life. Then we got someone's deleted message. I can send you the dream yoga PDF if you're interested. That would be cool. Dead Zone. What is that? If you want advice, just do as much as humanly possible. I should be doing twice as much as I do. Right? Yeah, the question is, I mean, pragmatically, how much can I actually get done in a day? But also, at what point do I feel like there's diminishing returns on what I'm really trying to get at, which is something like growing this channel and being productive in the stuff that I'm doing while having a job. And that's going to be a tricky thing for me to feel out. But at least with this slow incremental climb, that's not a huge difficulty right now. All right, so I have to get off at like 6:30, 6:40. So we got some time. What else do I want to talk about? So I have to actually edit this. I have done none of that. I actually didn't do much work on any content over the break. What I did was I dove into attention, which is the topic of next month. So it was a lot of me learning. So I'm trying to understand how we should open up part 2, where now we have this notion of attention, or we have this notion of reflecting on what you want to do, what you can do, etc. This is how we ended off part 1, with this notion of what does it mean for you to be free or to feel free. And we discussed that, and it requires some sort of reflecting in the moment, and it requires periodically reflecting in the moment so that you can earn that feeling of being free. If you reflect and then you don't reflect at all about this thing that you're trying to do, then how can you feel like you are free if you know that your brain is going to push you in many different ways? You have all these different drives that's pulling at you. A lot of, you've got TikTok that's trying to suck you in. You've got all kinds of foods and stuff that are trying to slow you down. And how can you take hold of this reflecting over time, but also in the moment? So the first topic that we need to talk about is attention, focus, and motivation. So unfortunately, this leads to a lot of like nitty-gritty neuroscience, but the takeaway, it seems, and at some point we're going to do some nasty draw.io stuff, I think I'm gonna draw.io a functional view of how the brain works, at least with regard to attention, just to hopefully make it more clear to the audience. Yeah, build a base, get acquainted. You should peep your Discord quick. Oh, sorry. I will. Discord. All right. Getting AI to diagnose my meditation. How cool does this sound? All right. Any references you can find for this specific experience when I strong negative emotion rises? I notice how it is totally unlocatable, and in that instant, it completely vanishes. I sustain this for 10 seconds or so and feel a big dissipation of energy in my body. That's very cool. Right. It's like yeah, I feel the same way with thoughts. Like you can't locate where the thoughts are. We have such an intuitive understanding of where feelings are, like certain visceral, like sensory feelings, that it's hard to separate the location of your like foot with the feeling of your foot on the floor. And of course, you know, you could try to do that. You could try to just point out that like in your mind that the feeling is not necessarily like at a location, it's in your mind. But yeah, thoughts are just like, you know, kind of out there. But one of the cool things that I keep learning with neuroscience and embodied cognition is that our thoughts are constantly engaging parts of our body, such that when we think about, so this is like the topic of simulation, like when we think about grasping something, we actually, you know, exercise those muscles, or at least exercise probably the parts of our brain that would make that aspect of experience conscious, if not actually getting down to our muscles. So right, like you can think about grasping without actually grasping your hand, but your brain is actually firing something off in the part of your brain that would fire off when you're going to grasp something. This is how we got into that whole discussion about how the group in the study where the group that just thought about learning a skill still learned it better than the people that didn't think about it, or if they were not to have thought about it. I think it was learning a song, and they actually played the song pretty well after you know, a short bit of time. I think they learned it as well as the group that actually practiced physically. After 5 days, I'm sorry, after 5 days they learned it as well as the other group that actually physically did it on day 3, if that makes any sense. So it was some slower pace of learning, but it was learning, which is crazy. A few months ago, I was experimenting with this kind of technique, and I learned I could do this. Yeah, very strange abstract experience. Heard Dr. K say there's no evidence for thoughts, just looking at the physical brain. No evidence for thoughts, just looking at the physical brain. What does that even mean? Hey, I was saying I'm using the front of my brain to activate my vagus nerve in a way I shouldn't be able to. The unlocatables phenomenon. From a neuroscience perspective, when you search for the emotion's location, you're engaging interoceptive awareness circuits while simultaneously activating executive control regions. So interoceptive, this is circuits that are specifically reading bodily state. So internal state. So exteroceptive would be something like our sense of touch or our vision. But interoceptive is like feeling our heart rate or our blood pressure, and the stuff that's the hormones in our blood and whatnot. And you know, that's downstream of your gut and stuff like that. So So yeah, you're while simultaneously activating executive control regions. This creates what researchers call cognitive reappraisal. You're essentially changing your relationship to the emotional signal before it fully cascades through your body's stress system. The fact that it vanishes when you look for it suggests you're catching the emotion at the recognition phase before the full physiological stress response, which can last 90 plus seconds once triggered, takes hold. You're demonstrating voluntary control over what's normally an automatic threat detection and response system, a remarkable feat of neuroplasticity. Right, so you can take hold of this stuff so that it doesn't dominate your conscious experience. And then this was this PDF was the Rinpoche, the Tibetan yogas. Was this the dream stuff? All right, was there anything that happened on the subreddit? Not the subreddit, the Discord. Stream chat, announcements? No, we're chilling. Still a ghost town. Oh, yogas of dream and sleep. Oh my gosh. First of all, okay, 171, that's not bad at all. Blind horse, lame rider. Man, this is wild stuff. Appendix, outline of dream yoga practices. The 4 foundational practices: preparatory practices before sleep, and the main practices. Yeah, I haven't gotten back into the whole lucid dreaming stuff in over 10 years now. Maybe 15 years ago. But maybe that would be fun. Maybe we do that for meditation month. Oh, okay, the link for the Dr. K thing.
A couple of
Gaza's population.
Oh man, what is going on there? Let's get it over here.
A couple of really interesting things.
Here we go. 2,000 hours meditation power. Whoa. Long build up, but then he starts talking about the practice. The theory is interesting though. Wow.
When it comes to the science of weird stuff in meditation. And that is that a lot of meditation takes place, this is going to sound so wonky, in layers of reality that we don't really understand or even acknowledge. So I'll give you a really simple example of this, okay? So you have thoughts. Do you know if there's any scientific evidence of the proof of thoughts?
I feel like that's a trick question.
I think we do. I know he's going to say no, but I think we do.
We can prove our brain fires in parts of its centers to create something that's a thought.
Oh, okay, excellent, very good. Okay. Right, so we can detect that your brain fires. So we usually study the brain in 2 ways, there are a couple of advanced ways, but generally speaking, we look at something called a functional MRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging, which looks at blood flow to different parts of the brain. And then we can also look at something called EEG, which is electroencephalogram, which looks at electrical activity on the brain. So we can look at like electrical activity, or we can look at blood flow and where it goes. Then there's also things like PET scans and things like that. But basically, we can measure electrical activity or blood flow. But is that a thought?
I would say no.
Okay, so how do we know? So there's this part of our brain called the amygdala. Okay, so the amygdala is like our fear and survival center of the brain.
So I guess to just make transparent my understanding here before we go in, the neural correlate we would want, which I think we have, is that we can see when people have certain types of thoughts. So let's just say a similar. There's an aspect of their thought that we can say is recognizable, at least at a conceptual level, that a very similar activity happens in the brain. And we know this from that one study from 2016. I don't know, the one about the bird tails and can you explain the study about neural correlates and conceptual thoughts, specifically with the bird tails. Can you briefly? I don't know enough in this area. Yep, same. Definitely the same. This is the type of neural correlate that we are looking for specifically as this is like we are trying to find out what we would like how we can connect this notion of our conceptual thoughts, the meaning that we experience, and specific parts of the brain. And I think this was like a huge study that kind of, I don't know, maybe opened up an avenue for that. But maybe I'm going crazy. I should have this on. I should have this like queued up. Do I have this in the document? A reference for the schema theory? No, I don't. Not yet. All right, 2014. Which investigated how their brains encode abstract concepts like relative length. While the stimuli in the experiment were technically lines of different lengths, they are frequently described in popular science or educational contexts using the analogy of bird tails. For example, comparing a long tail to a short tail to explain the evolutionary relevance of the skill. No, this is how their brains. Okay. I'm looking for. Okay, maybe I should just find the study. I literally have it in Consciousness Part 2. Is it here? No, I think it's in Consciousness Part 1, which is videos. Here we go. Oh. Can we download this and then just throw it in? It has been hypothesized that the brain organizes concepts into a mental map, allowing conceptual relationships to be navigated in a manner similar to that of space. Grid cells use a hexagonally symmetric code to organize spatial representations and are the likely source of a precise hexagonal symmetry in the functional magnetic resonance imaging signals. Humans navigating conceptual two-dimensional knowledge showed the same hexagonal signal in a set of brain regions markedly similar to those activated during spatial navigation. This grid-like signal is consistent across sessions acquired within an hour and more than a week apart. Our findings suggest that global relational codes may be used to organize non-spatial conceptual representations, and that these codes may have a hexagonal grid-like pattern when conceptual knowledge is laid out in two continuous dimensions. So, yeah, this is just, I mean, obviously this is not high fidelity. Like the type of correlate that they found in, was I right, 2016, is obviously not fully encompassing the concept that they're even looking at in this study. There's probably so much that goes into what we would consider to be the concept of like something like a bird's tail. And, you know, from our consciousness videos, it seems like we would want to find neural correlates in many different places of the brain, including places for like linguistic networks, the like affective networks. We would want to see like correlations, or we would want to see specific patterns persisting over time in many parts of the brain. But that's how we would find thoughts in the brain. That's what the thought would be. It's not that it's not like thoughts are floating externally. I shouldn't say that, but it seems highly plausible that we will be able to find these neural correlates once we have the technology and the machine learning to do so. And we just now need to wait. Now, I should ask. All right, let's continue though, because he might have a more comprehensive argument here.
It's a really primitive part of the brain. It's where we feel anxiety, fear, like crocodiles have an amygdala too. How do we know that fear comes from the amygdala?
Oof, now you're getting above my pay grade.
I don't think I am.
I mean, a lot of scientists have studied that, and they've determined based on brain scans that, like, when something happens.
Okay, great. So let's slow down, right?
Okay.
So let's.
All right, I'm gonna front load my understanding here as well. To say that that the emotion starts with the amygdala is actually kind of deceptive, where this is really a cascading of a lot of things. So the amygdala might, and I actually, you know what, I'm gonna front load this with, I don't know if what I'm about to say is absolutely correct, but this is what I think is going on. The amygdala starts a chain reaction that leads all the way down to the body, which you know, you change up stuff in the blood, you're releasing hormones, it's changing your heart rate, etc. And then this is now, like, that signal is now sensed by the hypothalamus, and that goes back in, and so that emotion of fear, while we might have been able to find what starts it, and when I say start, it's hard to tell, because what starts the fear? Is it that part of the brain that released those neuromodulators that affected the activation of some other part of the brain, etc.? Or was it the thing that actually triggered the amygdala to do that? And that's like a difficult thing to figure out. So really, what Dr. K can really argue here is something akin to the consciousness arguments against this notion that we can find what qualia is in the brain. It's not clear yet exactly how we feel certain things, specific, or, you know, whether that's very concrete concepts or if that's emotions itself. It seems like a lot of parts of the brain contribute to all of these experiences, and yeah, that isn't to say though that, like, the whole conclusion we took away with our consciousness videos was that that's not a reason to throw away the possibility that we will be able to find these in the future, and that we don't have information already that implies that we will be able to find these, or that we can see how this might take place. So yeah, I'm curious where he goes with that, because the subject reports fear, right? Yeah, that's another thing. Like, how do you know that? Right, like that's like a pragmatic way of going about it, but that's, you know, how do you know that the AI is actually experiencing fear or not? It's going to report fear, but is that actually it experiencing fear? And this is where what were those people called? The IIT consciousness. This is where the integrated information theory people will point out that, like, hey, the AI does not have the necessary complexity to you know, necessitate consciousness.
Say you're in an fMRI machine.
He's like, fuck no.
No. You're doing great. You're doing great. Right? So this is perfect, because this is what everyone who's listening needs to understand. So we slap you in a brain scanner and we measure your electrical activity. How do we know that you're afraid? Let's say we see blood flow to the amygdala as opposed to the blood flow to a different part of your brain.
Well, that would be my guess. You see where the blood's flowing.
But how do we know that that blood flow correlates with you being afraid?
I don't know.
We ask you. Right? So when we see blood flow in a particular place, we ask you, what are you feeling?
What if I lie?
Then we would get incorrect data. Right? So this is what people need to understand. I've asked, like, so trained at Harvard Medical School, was faculty there, was in a neuroscience lab there. I've asked a lot of neuroscientists, do we have any proof that thoughts exist? No, is the short answer. So everything that we know.
Okay, wait, hold on. Maybe he's making a completely different argument, but this is a very, I want to say, like, nihilistic argument. That if, this is one where it's like, how do we know that anyone's conscious? You know, that's That's the extreme of this argument. How do you know that someone is conscious? And this leads us to measures such as this leads us to measures such as the perturbational complexity index, which is based on a simple brilliant principle. When you perturb the brain, give it a little push, how complex and integrated is its response? And this, like, all of this stuff is based on inference. Like, we really don't know for sure, but once again, like, the same question that he's arguing, or like the same thing he's arguing, or at least suggesting here, is why should we believe anything? It's almost a, you know, it's a question that at its root is some sort of epistemological nihilism. And yeah, we have to commit to something. And that's the thing. But like, also we can get into that discussion now of what it means to even commit to some information. But yeah, I don't know if I would let him do this to me. Like that line going down to that level of argumentation would not be what I would want to go, or where I would want to go with that. I would prefer to go that original way I countered it. Take Dr. K. He got on this line because he said, in a sense, meditation is operating at another level of reality. So yeah, this is where it's like, hey, I'm not going to allow you to even talk about other levels of reality as a concept if we're not going to be able to take seriously this notion of knowledge itself. Because now, what does another level of reality even mean? So, yeah, I don't know if he would like that, but obviously I would do it in a way that is very respectful, because I like Dr. K.
Know about the psychology, right? So psychology is what happens in our mind. Like, I know this sounds kind of weird, but
it's like an abstraction.
You have no idea if I have thoughts, right? I could be a bot. You have no idea if anyone who's listening to this, they have no idea if we're AIs. Like, we have no subjective experience of someone else's subjective experience.
Hypothetically, yes.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So here's the first thing. So objectively, like, there's this whole material world which science measures, right? So we can, like, do brain scans, we can measure your heart rate, we can measure your blood pressure, we can touch you, we can x-ray you, we can do all these kinds of things.
I'll go full idealism on him if he starts bringing that up now. Like, we can't even commit to some physicalist notion of the world if we're going to be operating in a speculative framework. You know, how do we know that the world consists of matter? You know, yeah, we're like, all of these thoughts that we have are based on inference in some sense, but it's based on pattern recognition. It's based on what we've internalized, what we've learned. It's cultural. It's yeah, it's literally just, you know, in theory, it's just brain activity, but I guess that's what he's arguing against. But
so when you ask the original question of how do they elevate their body temperature, so on a physiologic level, they engage in certain practices that we probably don't really know. So we know that body temperature is regulated somewhat by brown fat, which is like the fat in our cells that we basically burn to maintain body temperature. Probably has something to do with, like, thyroid hormone and things like that. As your thyroid hormone goes up, your brown fat activity will increase. That's why people at equatorial climates are usually a little bit more overweight than people who are living super north or super south. Right? So if you go to Texas, you're going to see a higher rate of obesity than you will in a place like New York or Boston.
I feel like doing another response video is similar to how I did it with Alex O'Connor. Like, there was enough content there for us to do a video, but I don't know if I want to be spending my time doing that. I need to just learn more about this stuff. I feel like I'm at the point where I can identify, like, I can kind of get a sense of the space, but I need a better sense of the space. And I need to learn more. All right, so that wasn't there. Yeah. So okay, going back to where I started here, we need to get a sense of attention, like what's going on with attention, because we have this other problem where like we like to think that top-down attention comes from us. It starts with us, right? As if there's some part of us that isn't already in the brain, and like we're creating the thought top down, and we're like having that clash with the bottom up signals of the body. But that's really not what's going on. What's going on is actually a process where top down and bottom up are continually affecting each other, such that top down thoughts are actually affected by bottom up signals, and vice versa. And top-down thoughts are affected by other top-down thoughts. And so the question is then, what do we make of our thought of us thinking about something top-down? Like when we talk about top-down intentions or just, top-down volition, what are we really talking about? And this goes back to part 1 of our document where, and this also goes back to the consciousness stuff, that while we're doing this while this whole process is going, some aspect of this whole process is becoming conscious to us. And we've pointed out where this is, like how this is probably happening. So we might even have to have like a discussion like this, maybe in part 2. I don't know, maybe we just move it to part 1. But functionally, we could imagine that, the brain and the body are in constant coordination with each other, and this is affecting our conscious view of what we're doing. Now, granted, what we're doing is not decoupled from the brain. Like, I'm sorry, our thoughts about what we're doing is not decoupled from the brain. It's like it is those thoughts that's actually affecting other top-down thoughts, and also the changes in our physiology. So it's delicate to make this type of story where we just have to point out that what we're looking for when we're thinking about our top-down attention in part 2, because part 2 is practical, like we're looking for the practical, what we can do. So when we're thinking about these things, we're not referring to the stuff that our prefrontal cortex is generating. Like we're not just thinking about the thoughts that our default mode network is coming up with. We're not thinking about what else do we have here? There was a bunch. We'll go through this at some point, but something is generating options almost. Did I say options? Scrolling through options. Brain frantically tries new models. No, but what was this? Who was actually in? Who detects the match? The orbital frontal cortex, but that wasn't the thing that's actually generating the... Prefrontal cortex cannot think globally without the thalamocortical loop. The striatum must keep the gate open for... Okay, this goes into more complex stuff, but we've got this thalamus that is acting as like a hub for a lot of different parts of the prefrontal cortex and other parts of the brain. Yeah, I have to go through this. I have to organize these thoughts. Yo, Ivan Neo, how's it going? I appreciate the follow. Come on, we just proved thoughts don't exist. We're not allowed to think. True. Yeah. But yeah, the main point here is that when we are trying to find a practical practical strategy or practical technique within part 2, and we're starting with attention because that's really the, at least conceptually, that's the source of all of our intentionality, or if we're trying to, I guess I'm not sure, Ivan, how much you've, are you writing a paper on this? I am writing a paper on this stuff, and unfortunately I have to learn a lot for it. The short pitch is like the ultimate aim is determine a path for life. Like, the big goal that everyone kind of has. So like one of the main takeaways here is that the goal is to provide a clear, adaptable framework that works for everyone regardless of individual differences. So we are struggling with the balance between going into these deep topics that are absolutely necessary and then making them accessible. That's a real issue. In order to determine a path for life, we have to consider how we can identify and pursue our goals abstractly, like generally, like how do we actually go about this practically speaking? Because the main goal we want is this determine a path for life. So what I'm talking about right now with attention is actually what I believe needs to open us up for identifying and pursuing our goals. Like we need some idea of how we leverage whatever top-down attention is to pursue something. So this would be the topic of attention, focus, and motivation. That's what I'm going to be trying to tackle in January. But all of this stuff is on top of the very the philosophical bedrock and the neurological or neuroscientific bedrock of how we can understand the world and our freedom within it at all. Like before we could even consider how we can identify and pursue our goals, we need to have some sense of what it means for us to even intend to do something. And I guess that perhaps should be where we discuss things like attention, but we do so it's just in a more base level. Like we talk about attention in a very surface level way of I don't know, we've got dorsal attention network helps us stay locked in on a chosen task, while the ventral attention network keeps watch for anything unexpected, ready to shift our focus if something important happens. So we don't really take the topic too seriously in part 1, but I guess just to point out, is this a physicalist compatibilist framework? This is fundamentally so we've actually spent a lot of time trying to figure out what language we're allowed to use for describing the framework. This is neither physicalist nor idealist. It's compatibilist, but it's fundamentally a pragmatist framework. It's a normative pragmatist framework of how we can talk about these things, given the fact that all of the things that we know and the concepts that we have and what we can communicate is all afforded to us by our culture, our past, our current mood, etc. Given all these things, when I'm talking about so we have a discussion of how we can even think about truth given all those what I just mentioned, and unfortunately we can't act as if there's some external truth that is absolute in some sense. Even the physical world, like we're totally bought into the physical world in this. When I say I'm not a physicalist, I'm not trying to say that we're not completely bought into the physical world right off the bat. This is I get in our opening introduction, what I call the prologue. It's kind of like a vet where we point out that we are firmly, we believe in the physical world. However, once we get into the bedrock of our philosophical position, we have to point out that the physical, the understanding of consciousness and the understanding of our understanding that the physical world even gives us points out that what we actually understand when we think about the physical world is actually not the physical world itself. I mean, granted, we touched upon that at a very basic surface level way when in this first part, but we don't really get to the ontological conclusions of that or implications, that we don't experience the physical world directly. These thoughts that I'm having about the physical world are not actually the physical world. but then the question is, like, how do they correlate with the physical world so well? And in our epilogue, we make sense of collective knowledge, how we end up with these notions of the physical world, and we point out how our understanding of the physical world is such that it has such a constraint on what our understanding of it eventually is. And so we talk about how the foundation of shared meaning, the trajectory of wisdom. So we point out that the trajectory of wisdom. So this is like, pre-science as we think about it today. How stories and let's just say knowledge, comes to, and how certain things win out over time, etc. And then we get to the developing authority of method, and we point out how certain standards of what counts as true kind of developed from that previous thing I just mentioned. And so we try to cover a ton of topics in here. It's what works empirically independent of metaphysics. Are we so like the point here is that we have, because of this discussion, we are bought into the method of empirical science, which I think implies that our current understanding of the physical world is incomplete and that we will learn more about it. But it's the method that actually gives us the authority to believe in the current understanding that we have, and also the method also has authority over that understanding. Like it is allowed to update that previous understanding. So for me, given that I don't actually believe that the physical world is like the fundamental absolute source of ontology. There's so much that's I guess concept or abstract and negotiated through just like social interactions and stuff like that. I actually don't know. I don't remember where. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Given that our understandings are so contingent and that we arrive at pragmatically similar understandings, right? Like I always use the pen as the example. Like we each have a pragmatically similar understanding of that this is a pen. When I say pragmatically similar, it's that when I say this is a pen, you roughly understand what I mean, and when I say that, I mean you have a physiological response that doesn't compel you to disagree. That being said, when we look at a pen, we each have slightly, subtly different understandings, different responses to that experience. We might like the pen or not. Getting back to what I was trying to say, the heuristic, and this is just conceptual, like this is afforded to me because I am lucky enough to be able to have this in my mind. The heuristic that I need to follow when looking at what is true would be something like that method of empirical science. So that's how we are still grounded in the science there. So, but more importantly, what is a pen? Understood. Okay, nice. Yeah. So it's a really weird position to be in because it's kind of, it sounds idealist, but it also sounds physicalist, but it's neither. Because really at the end of the day, it comes down to how we talk about these things, how we communicate these things. Because what I'm trying to do when I communicate is to effectively have someone else pragmatically understand what I'm trying to convey. And that's like a, that's a difficult thing, but it also so I got to that point or to that position by the linguistic pragmatists, so like Robert Brandom and Wittgenstein and stuff like that. I'm a physicalist, but I like your approach. Thank you. Yeah, I like, I guess this allows me to be friends with a bunch of different facets of this consciousness atlas here, but some of these I guess we are not commensurate with. That said, like physicalism is super easy to believe in. It's just that, yeah, as I said, in my reading of the physicalist framework, it disqualifies physicalism itself. Like it, and when I say that, I'm following like the specific. You know what? Like this definition is probably fine. Actually, is a philosopher who believes everything that exists is so. Yeah, so the power of being fundamentally a pragmatist is to point out that when you have a definition like this, we could even just do this, right? The definition here. We can point out the ambiguity in the definition itself. It's like, what is the meaning of this definition? And really, pragmatically speaking, it's what people infer it to be. And if, like, ideally, we want something that is not ambiguous, such that everyone infers, or most people infer something similar. But there's ambiguities in these definitions that make us we're not allowed to commit to it. And the ambiguity is simply the authority that it's giving the physical here without explaining, without including like how the physical world would affect our understanding of it. And yeah, here the ontological monism. Like I think what I'm following is something, something akin to an ontological monism, except that, I point out that really like the meaning that we experience is coming from our physiology and our conscious experience. I guess you could still say that's a ontological monism, but. That atlas looks at, I would, someone in this chat pointed this out. This atlas is from a specific paper. So this paper is rather long, and it covers all of these different models of consciousness. And then it arrives at like a few that it deemed were more, I don't know, coherent or cogent. I did not read this, but I did. I think we spent a day where we ran it through Gemini and talked about it. But yeah, I'm not sure how you found this channel, but recently I'd made a video discussing consciousness that I actually do just straight up say, I commit to physicalism in this. But yeah, this is where I point out I don't know where my thoughts are. This is our introduction where I basically just follow like a what's the guy's name? Damasio homeostasis framework of how consciousness arises evolutionarily, and then we actually get to the nitty-gritty of like how we can think about what is actually happening that results in our conscious experience in the moment. So we follow Dewan's global neuronal workspace theory. But the cool thing about this video is I get to some ontological takeaways that is actually still the foundation for what I've said today. So even though I do just, I perhaps inappropriately say that we commit to a physicalist framework in that video, but technically we shouldn't commit to a physicalist framework, because as I saw within the comments and the comments of when I posted this on r/consciousness, there's ambiguity in that label, and it insinuates things that I didn't want to insinuate. That said, the video goes deep enough into those topics where, it actually explains what I'm trying to get at, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people that commented didn't read or didn't watch the whole thing. Okay, my view is that the fundamental laws of the world are simple and non-mental, and that we evolved abstracting ability because there is adaptive advantage to having top-down control within bottom-up constraints. Must have forgotten that diagram. Yes, so like all of that, I'm totally down with. everything that you just said. I like that's something that I think we have to commit to, given the science. I think that there's a little more nuance to the top, and this is just based on stuff that I did recently, on top-down attention and bottom-up. I think the one thing that, the one takeaway that I saw that might be slightly outdated is the idea that like the idea that our like top-down rationality is combating our bottom-up irrational constraints. So I guess this isn't really exactly what you said, but it could be taken that way. Where really, and this is another topic that I need to get into soon when we talk about the notion of thinking itself, but it really seems like the bottom-up signals are what affords us our rational thinking. And this goes to stuff like Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis. Like there's a connection between these two roles, the top down and bottom up, that it's not, it might be simplistic to say that top down is simply the control and the bottom up is the constraint. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to work out this month, to give a full rundown of that in a simple way. That's the goal here, to do the deep dive and then to try to simplify what I've come to. One of my followers said they heard about my channel here. Yeah, we so somehow, ironically, and unfortunately I have to hop off in like a few minutes, but ironically, when we were working on the script for that consciousness video, someone pointed out that you were live. I think we had visited you once before when you were talking about, I think you were talking about relativity. So something that, even though it's really interesting, unfortunately it's not in the scope of the discussions around this document. Basically, all that I do in this channel revolves around this document and trying to build it out. But yeah, ironically, the next time we hopped in, I was working on that script and you were talking about consciousness as well. And I think I floated a comment or two about the global workspace theory. And yeah, basically I guess I was asking questions that were similar to what we literally just talked right now. So I'm glad we got that discussion in there. But yeah, I'm trying to make a non-toxic, wholesome community. So I'm glad that my followers and your followers seem to be pretty chill. And I think I agree. When people discuss free will, they always assume the deterministic bottom-up process is in opposition to good reasoning, right? That's something that we're going to have to assault, like the very notion of rational thinking. So like when I in my understanding right now, like when we talk about rational thought, we have to point out the contingency of our cultural understanding of what is rational. And when I was discussing how the very scientific method developed over time, it was affecting what caused people to think that their thoughts were rational. And that isn't to say that like our thoughts feeling rational today are like privileged over the thoughts of people 2,000 years ago and what they thought was rational. It's the same affective systems that make you feel like what you're saying makes sense and is rational. So what changed was really like a heuristic that was culturally embedded. And given that we've internalized these standards of evidence and science and stuff like that, that leads us to and just like logical principles, that leads us to in the moment have thoughts that this is or is not rational when we're having them, whether they even arise, right? Like when we have thoughts that are rational, it's not that like anything tells us that we just continue. It's usually when something goes wrong that it comes to our attention, like when someone says something that we find irrational. So yeah, like I think we have to assault that notion that we are just, good reasoning is rational thinking, and we have to consider what it means to, be rational or have, what good reasons are. Are good reasons just things that sound compelling to you, or things that contribute to the conclusion that you agree with? Can you agree that there's a good reason for that contributes to a conclusion that is against the conclusion that you believe in, but you can empathize with how that would be a good reason? We have to get into that topic. But yeah, that's going to be for another day. My own view is that if you are good at reasoning, non-determinism will just make you worse or slower. I guess, what does non-determinism mean here? But yeah, so the practical takeaway of that is that it's actually important that we read and study up on what we've found to be good logical principles, because that will affect our processing in the moment, such that if we want to, more effectively think, there are things that we can study now in order to affect our thinking in the future. And, that would be things like fallacies and stuff like that. Basically, determinism is friend to free will, not enemy, at least as far as free will contributes to good reasoning. Right, that's the tricky thing. Like, what's the heuristic to ensure that you're moving in the direction you want to go in? And that's like one of the topics that we have to cover. So like, at the end of this part one, like the main climax is this framework of freedom, and it's a framework where we have to talk about freedom through understanding. This is where we point out the contingency of our own understanding in the moment. I like to use the phrase that we are predisposed to think the thing that we're thinking in the moment, or to experience the thing that we're experiencing in the moment. And so, yeah, we see a sort of compatibilism where we can point out the determinism that's inherent in our understanding of the physical world. We can point out the determinism that seems to be apparent in our own thoughts. Like when you do mindfulness meditation, you can realize that your thoughts you're not controlling your thoughts, they're just popping up. And obviously when we discuss things like bottom-up signals and whatnot, there's obviously things that are happening that are affecting our emotions and whatnot in the moment. So given that, how do we find some sort of free will? And the way that I go about this is like the very understanding that we can have freedom, like this notion that I find myself in a position where I feel like I can go and do something that's afforded to me by what I've learned so far. It's like something cultural. That's like kind of a starting ground here, where I can at least identify what I understand. So the fact that I have some conceptual understanding is a huge deal, and we get into that. And yeah, my conceptual understanding is constrained by the physical world. It's constrained by the social landscape where, I don't have full control over my will or my conceptual understanding. In every moment, my brain is changing in ways that I don't understand subtly. And when I'm in a conversation with someone, the way that they respond makes me feel certain ways that changes the trajectory of my understanding. There's so much going on here. What our framework affords us. Yes. So by understanding what's all at play and what predisposes us, that gives us a good basis. But then we get to freedom through reflection. The idea that if I were to take hold of this, if I really want to take hold in some sense, like my own understanding of freedom, where I'm actually going to direct my trajectory here, it requires some sort of reflection. So this is akin to what I'm going to be looking at with attention. It requires that you actually focus in the moment and consider, what do I need to do in order to get this thing done? Given that we're, in this document, we're very much practically focused. And yeah, we go through reflection. The fact that I have a conceptual understanding that I can deliberately reflect on in the moment is a huge deal. Okay, I should read this out. Also, unfortunately, I do have to head out in like a second, but I'll finish the freedom. And then the other thing that we point out is that, once I stop reflecting on what I should be doing in order to do something, in order to, what is necessary for me to complete this goal or do what I want to do, whatever is necessary for me to feel like I actually intended to do this thing. Once I stop reflecting, then a bunch of automatic processes start taking hold. A lot of things are driving me in different directions. Whether that's, something obvious like TikTok and just dopamine, dumps. Social dynamics are going to point me in directions that might not be where I want to go. There's all kinds of biases and whatnot that'll push me around in different directions. So this is where we get freedom through realignment. It can't just be that you reflect once and you're free. It needs to be like if we're going to have a coherent notion of freedom, it needs to be something that we reapply or reassess where we are. Are we moving in the direction that we thought we were? Because the second that we stop reflecting, our very understanding of what it is we want to do, what it is we are doing, and what it is we still need to do is constantly changing. And this just goes with our view of how our understanding is dynamic. And so, it necessitates some sort of freedom through realignment. And this points out freedom as a process. It's not something that, it's not like we are ever done and now we're free. It's something that we earn over time. Now, when I say that it's something is, like, I'm not trying to say that this is what freedom is. This is what I'm trying to do in this document is propose a way that we can think about these things that is practical. So I guess just the thing that we start out with here, how can we evaluate our framework? We're looking for coherence, explanatory power, practical utility. We're not looking for some ontological truism. Like that's not what I think the science even shows us. This is why we are fundamentally pragmatic or pragmatist at the end of the day. All right, I'm sorry. I will read what you said after that or during that. Do you like to separate rationality into the epistemic and then instrumental? I think for me, I've in part one, I only focus on rationality as the feeling, given that like we're looking for, I guess, noticeable heuristics at this point. Like in part one, we are just trying to understand how we understand the world and how we can understand our freedom. So in part one, it really doesn't matter to have some sort of instrumental nor I guess in part two that would be instrumental. In part one it's epistemic, but it's pointing out what it actually can tell us. Like, what does that feeling tell you? It doesn't tell you that you're right. The feeling of being rational, of saying something rational, of hearing something rational is the same regardless of whether you end up being right or wrong in the end, right? The one thing I point out is that I know for sure that I have been wrong about many things that I ended up finding out that I was wrong about, and those things felt rational in those moments. So, the question is, how do I know that it's the thing that I'm feeling that is rational now is actually rational? And it requires, heuristics that we don't arrive until we actually get to the epilogue and we talk about the authority of method, the scientific toolkit, how this works. But then a really important section near the end here is integrating the domains of wisdom and science, and this allows us to navigate between what might be, like, for me, an intuition is pretty important, but how do I know if that intuition's true, and like what is the standard to which I need to hold myself for that intuition to determine whether or not it's true? And ideally I would want some evidence. and that's not something I'm taking out of thin air. It's something that we got through a long development of philosophy and science. And then the coolest part of this whole entire document, if there's anything to check out, is really where we point out our pragmatist view, which is where we assess our own framework, and we point out how contingent this very paper is, in a similar way that, I point this out in the consciousness video, similar to how Heidegger calls being in time a hermeneutic phenomenology. Like, it's afforded to him by his cultural understanding or his contingent understanding in that moment. It's interpretive. So what I'm doing here is just leveraging what I believe to be like colloquial ways of talking about things, and leveraging that language so that people who read it have a certain understanding about these topics that are pragmatically similar to what I'm trying to communicate. So so yeah, I don't know if that answered the question at all. I tend to go into these long monologues. Unfortunately, I have to leave. Every single time that I have to leave my stream because I'm going somewhere, like physically going somewhere, I have something anomalous and exciting happen on stream that I want to stay along for. I would love to talk. I love to talk about these topics. So anytime I'm live, which is usually every day, feel free to come in, and I will gladly discuss anything. I'm trying to find and then push the front lines of all these topics. So that would be awesome. Yeah, I'm not sure how that works. Like, even though I've been streaming for almost 2 years, I'm new in spirit. So Reclusi, have I joined too late? Is the stream? I'm sorry, the stream is finishing like right now. I'm actually supposed to be somewhere at 7, but I got caught away explaining the stuff we've been working on for the past while. Yeah, so I guess the background, Ivan, is that it maybe took like a year and a half writing out the draft for part 1, and then we spent a lot. We kind of got sidetracked. I kind of got stun locked on the consciousness topic, which was really beneficial. I was glad that I got stun locked like that, which led to making those videos. And then now we're gearing up for part 2, which is going to have to dive into how to, the practical stuff, practical strategies for how to identify and pursue goals. And, that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. And then once we're done that, we can then get to like how to actually leverage all that we've just discussed to live a meaningful life. And, once again, for both part 2 and part 3, like, it's going to be very much geared towards anyone can use this, or like, regardless of who you are, this is applicable to you. So if we get into morality in part 3, like, we're not allowed to just like take a moral stance. Like, it's going to have to be something that fits or that's abstract enough such that anyone can apply it to their own life. There's a whole conversation there, but expected, I fully get it. Yeah, I apologize because I usually start at like 6 or 6:30, but unfortunately I have to get off. I have to get off now. But thank you all for chilling. Thanks for talking, and hopefully it's a maybe that I'll be on tomorrow, but I will be on, I believe, Thursday and Friday. We'll be back at it. But as far as I'm concerned, this is grind season, and we got to get stuff done. So have a good rest.